Before we dive into today's episode of Small Talk, our friends at MyPayNow deserve a cheeky shout out for their birthday special. You could score $50 when you refer your friend to MyPayNow. Once they successfully sign up, you will both instantly pocket $50. See mypaynow.com.au for more information. T's and C's apply. Welcome back for another episode of Small Talk, Mick. And as you were just saying off camera, racing never sleeps. We're at the tail end of our winter carnival, Royal Ascot, right in action. The Aussies never sleep.
Absolutely, it's always a time of year here in Australia where we've got horses, jockeys, owners, trainers, all trying to make themselves that story that comes out of Ascot every year from an Australian perspective, and we've already had a good start.
Oh, we really have. Obviously, kicking things off, Mark Zahra was the story. He made his pit stop on the way to Ibiza, truly worth its while, steering home Docklands, and was Harry Eustace's first Group 1 win, and what better way than on the world stage?
Yeah, it's very much a Mark Zahra type story. Flies to London at the pointy end of the plane. One ride, one win, Group 1, wins the Queen Anne, which is a race that jockeys only dream of winning or even getting a start in, especially Australian jockeys, and all before a 5-week break in Ibiza and the Greek islands, which I'm sure for Mark Zahra is going to be very, very quiet.
Oh, yeah, very much so, especially after celebrating a final Group 1 win for the season. But what a horse Dockland is. I am quite disappointed from an Australian perspective that he won't be coming back down to target a Cox Plate, but the way that he just relishes that Ascot straight, he's yet to run outside of the placings and now the winner's stall when running there, and the team plans on keeping him there where he's happy before he hopefully goes off to a very lucrative career at stud.
Yeah, it's a horse that it's cool seeing a horse like that win such a big race. A horse that was only out here in Australia not too long ago, doing his thing, and missed the jump. Mark Zahra dropped the whip, and in the finals,
I loved his post-race comments on that, by the way. We'll get back to it.
yeah, he dropped the whip in the final stages and gets Dockland past the post first. I guess he was quite lucky that there was very little pace in the race. Allowed him to make up for that margin. I think probably 2 lengths missed the start by. So and it's not very often, a horse kind of finds a length when it's not being whipped. And that's what Docklands did. And, Aussie-owned horse, Aussie jockey, 1-2 punch for Australia. And, it would have been nice, like you said, to have this horse come back for the Cox Plate. But it looks as if they're going to protect him as an entire, like you said. He's a bull, and he's going to stay and just chase those biggest and best mile races across France and England in the next couple of months.
At least when we do look at the Cox Plate, we have Carl Spackler to look forward to. He was a bit unlucky in that race. He probably peaked on his run and got run down a bit late. But Kirima and Yulong bringing him back down under to contest a Cox Plate. He is a super exciting horse as we look towards the Spring Carnival.
Yeah, I thought Carl Spackler looked the winner. A couple of furlongs out from the finish. I was watching the replay without knowing the result, and it just looked like he felt the pinch late, and it would have been some performance for Carl Spackler to come out and win, because he's definitely not in peak condition, and he's running alongside some of the best milers in the world. So I saw enough from Carl Spackler to suggest that there's a few big races here in Australia, the King Charles and the Champions Mile, the ones that have stuck out to me that they're truly looking to be this horse's cup of tea. When he touches down here and gets in the hands of the Mar team. And why not a Cox Plate, to beef up that field? And, he looks like to be a serious player in anything in that middle distance range. And, I wonder what cap colour he's going to wear, because Yulong are going to have 3, maybe 4 runners. Via Sistina and Treasure the Moment look guaranteed starters in this year's edition. Why not add Carl Spackler? All eyes and all ears are on Carl Spackler for me once he gets here in Australia. And I'm a big fan of the movie Caddyshack, so I love the name too. So he goes straight in my book.
He certainly looks like one that's going to be excellent to follow, as you said, particularly, he's a 3-time Grade 1 winner in the US. That was his first time on a straight track, but he still handled it so well. And as you said, if he does go towards a Cox Plate, I'm so looking forward to seeing him around that tight turning track and just really build that momentum into his run. Yulong really seemed to be, building up a formula for themselves outside of Treasure the Moment. Via Sistina was obviously brought over to Australia as an Irish-bred horse who raced in the UK. Carl Spackler is, I believe, an Irish-bred horse, raced in the US, then raced in the UK, and then he'll be in Australia. But they seem to be really having this affinity with bringing horses over here.
I think, Yulong's strategy and their motive is clearly that they love racing in Australia, but they also love having horses come from all over the world. And, there are parts of the world where their horses are bred a lot nicer. And, for some of these distances, especially with those staying distances and middle distances, they prove time and time again to be better than our crop. So why not go and chase these talents from the US, from Europe, from Japan, wherever they're coming from in the world, and bring them down under where the racing, not so much the quality of horse, but the spectacle that is racing here in Australia is as good as it gets in my eyes anyway. So why not, have the best horses on the best tracks? It just makes a recipe for making cash, and that's what Yulong do so well.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have a very green spring, I will say.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for our girl Asfura, it wasn't meant to be in the King Charles. They had a few hiccups along the way with travel delays, and she certainly looked like she felt the pinch in that run.
Yes, for a loon, she looked to be travelling, which I don't think many expected, given there was a few whispers that, she wasn't, going all that well, but from memory, I remember hearing those whispers last year about Asfora, and she came out and in the King Charles at Ascot and won well. So I think the best part of this story with Asfora, no matter where she was going to finish in that race, is that Henry Dwyer, a trainer from down here in Victoria, is living the dream. He's living a dream that trainers from all over the world just they dream about. It's to have a horse that's good enough to contest at Royal Ascot this time of year. It's such a big effort from Henry and from his team to even just get the horse over there and to make it all happen. It's not the result they wanted after last year, but it would have been silly not to come back and have another crack, given she ran so well last year. So they'll progress on to the King George. I think it's at Goodwood on August 1, and hopefully Asfura by then's a little bit more settled and ready to win.
Yeah, definitely. And then they're looking to even break more records potentially in Ireland and France. Can't remember which way around it is, but in one country, no Australian horse has ever raced, Australian trained, and no Australian trained horse has ever won in the other country. So big preparation ahead of Asfora, and it looks like it'll likely be her last racing season. So the team is certainly looking to make the most of it, get as much black type on that page as possible. But did you see, I saw it on Twitter yesterday, it was hilarious. The owners of Asfora over in the UK, they made up a song for Asfora. It was something along the lines of "From Ballarat to Geelong, we've all come to Ascot to cheer her along." It was an absolute belter. I have to get Nate, our videographer, to edit it in. It was amazing.
Sounds very Australian. No, I haven't seen it.
Very
I'd
much
love you to
so.
send that to me, because that's what it's all about. And it was one good thing, hearing Mark Zara talk post race about how many Aussies he heard when he was bringing Docklands back through the yard. He just said it felt like he was back home in Australia. It was just Aussie voices screaming out, and he said it really felt like a celebration of Aussie racing over there. It's not an Aussie horse, but as we spoke about, Aussie ownership, Aussie jockey, and the Aussies racing fans are there. I know my parents were there. I had friends who were there, and they said the day in general was just fantastic. And I saw some footage of the crowd singing Sweet Caroline, and it's very much a racing song or a sporting song that people love to sing, but that's the best I've ever heard it sung. And yeah, geez, I want to get over there as soon as possible. I think while I'm still young and able to have a bit of fun. I've got to, I think I've got to do it before I'm 30. I'm 26 now, so I've got a bit of time,
Ooh.
but I'll get it done.
Yeah, you got to. I'm having the worst FOMO, from the fashions to the racing. The weather looks so beautiful. The pre and post race picnics. Oh, get me to Ascot. But at least our Aussie friends over there do still have a little bit more to cheer on. Last night they actually got to cheer home James McDonald, steered home his first winner aboard Crimson Advocate, who I woefully only had for a place bet. But tonight, we're obviously filming on a Thursday. We get to cheer home Hey True Blue, very aptly named by the First Light Racing team. It's racing in the Norfolk, looks a very impressive 2-year-old, and will come over here next season to be trained by Tony Golan.
Yeah, it's another big night. I'm always spewing that I just don't have the schedule where I can, stay up and watch those races. But it's the first thing I do every year is roll over when my alarm goes off, get on Twitter, and watch these races. And it's always awesome to see the results, no matter where the Aussies finish. As I said, it's just amazing that they're over there representing us. And yeah, we go again tonight.
Are you working Sunday, or are you going to stay up and watch Stormboy hopefully redeem himself?
I'm off the Stormboy train, unfortunately. I think I've seen enough. But no, I won't be staying up to watch him unless he'd come out and won last start. I'll probably be a little bit more enticed, but I'm more focused on from a Stormboy perspective, in a sense, to wait till he gets to start and to see if he can produce some spectacular progeny, because he's a beautiful build, he's a beautiful looking horse, he can race, we know he can win, but I think it's past his time. So onto the breeding barn for me.
All right, straight skip over Stormboy. Well, before we get into this weekend's racing, we have to take a look back at the huge Straddie Day. And it was a day for everyone continuing to build those picket fences. I want to start with Cool Archie, first of all. Got his first Group 1 win in the JJ Atkins. That was a remarkable run.
He was home a long way out, Cool Archie. I had a close eye on J Mac and Hidden Achievement. He was arguably travelling better than Cool Archie at some point during that straight, but J-Mac did stick to that inside running rail, and I guess, we could say that was the inferior ground. It was just too much of a task to chase down a horse who both wants to win and knows how to win. That's being Cool Archie. The world is Chris and Corey Munce's oyster with this boy, short as a Coolmore Stud Stakes, and for all we know, a possible start in a Cox Plate, with a very light weight, because he really just has gotten better as the races have gotten longer. He's just going to continue to develop. I guess it really depends on what happens in the next couple of months. He's obviously gone back to the paddock. I'm just tipping that a horse like this is going to see so much progression. And I've seen enough to suggest that Cool Archie's capable of anything. Chris Muntz has said might be the best horse he's ever trained, and I tell you what, the drift pre-race must have cost those bookies a fortune. And to have a race following, or a couple of races later with War Machine, drifting as well, it was a silly price, Cool Archie, in the end. And he really showed that he's probably the best 2-year-old of this season.
Oh, most definitely. I was about to say, you look at him, as you touched on, he could go to a Coolmore next, he could go to even up to a Cox Plate. His ticks all round, from 1,200 metres to the mile, tick, wet track, fast track, tick. He has to be our 2-year-old of the season. I don't even know anyone who comes to mind that's even up to that calibre of versatility that we see in Cool Archie.
Yeah, and that's why I've just got so much hope for this horse, because it's hard to find. You mentioned all the ticks. It's hard to find any crosses. You said it last week, all he's done, but before the race, we were talking about all he's done is just win and impress and do it on all surfaces, all conditions, from all different parts of the track. He just, like I said, loves to race, loves to win, and knows how to win, and that's the most important thing. When owning and training a horse, and even when you're backing a horse, and that's why I was all over Cool Archie last weekend. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think, now that Chris Muntz has put himself in a position where he's a top tier trainer now in Australia, Chris and Corey Muntz are right in that top tier. So we're going to start hearing more down in these southern states about where's Cool Archie going to be placed. We're going to hear it early on. We're probably going to see a couple of races circled and really start to picture what Chris and Corey's opinions are of Cool Archie, whether they're going to keep him at the shorter distances or whether they think he can get out to further and contend in some of these, maybe some big weight for age races with lightweights. It's exciting. It's so exciting. And it's so exciting for Queensland racing. I think they continue to go to new heights. Antino's the poster boy heading into this spring, but I wouldn't be surprised if Cool Archie's making more headlines than Antino, because he's doing it all right now.
Oh, he has to be. And he's so well on track for even a lucrative stud career. I know I hate talking about it because we don't want to see these 2-year-olds potentially retire too early, but you look back at you can't really draw comparisons, but you kind of can. He's sort of emulating those early career successes of the likes of the Autumn Sun, who's had such a phenomenal career at stud already. Broadsiding, who we're all eagerly anticipating those first glimpses of his first season foals. But he's so well on track and so far advanced in terms of precocious stallion types. He's going to make a huge splash, and then being the son of Coolazzabil, so he's got that Savabeel bloodline, the versatility, just how well he's handled his first preparation of racing, and as you said, the scope for his career. There's got to be some stud farms walking around offering some serious money for him already.
Oh, no doubt. But I think, at the moment, the focus is going to be on the track because the fans are loving it. The whole racing community is loving it. And I'm sure Chris and Corey are loving it, having this horse,
Yes.
winning these big races. It is great having, the thought of having such a potential stallion who's going to be generating a lot of money. But I think for these trainers, that the real moments they want are winning those big races. And I think Cool Archie's got a lot more winning to do in his career before he heads off to stud.
Yeah, most definitely. The other horse of the day who certainly looks like he's got a lot more winning to do was War Machine. $3.20 was the short price that he actually started at, but God, that was a huge run, and he was going to win it from a long way out.
Yeah, he really it all went to plan for Tim Clark. Got cover and a bit like Cool Archie, almost a very similar win. Just hit the lead, fair way out, but you could tell from a long way out they were going to win. But Cool Archie, he kind of looked as if he'd had the race won and done, but there was a horse called Yellow Brick, who I'm sure you're very familiar with,
Oh,
who
I was shaking.
possibly, without a bit of interference at the top of the straight, could have won the Stradbroke and knocked off War Machine. And
Yeah.
what about Yellow Brick heading into the Spring Carnival?
Gosh, he was my run of the day if I can have one. That was just a remarkable run. He's obviously been a sweetheart of Queensland racing for a long time, which is interesting in itself given that he's yet to strike at anything above Group 3 level. But he just always tries his heart out, always puts in a gut buster, and can surprise on occasions like this when the pressure's actually on. He was going to target an Epsom last spring, which to me is just the perfect race for this horse. Mile, handicap conditions, and he's going to target it again this year. Hopefully we don't get a bout of the travel sickness once again, but he looks so on target for a race like this. I was talking to Maddie at the beach yesterday, actually. She's tipped him out. Have a few weeks. They're going to get him down there nice and early, have a couple of lead-up runs, potentially trial down there, get the horse perfectly fine-tuned and on track so that hopefully there's no stopping him in an Epsom because it looks to be the most perfect storm for this horse.
Yeah, the ability's always been there for Yellow Brick, but the hiccups have been prominent time and time again. Whether it's been that sickness or whether it's been, injury, looks to have, found that form that, sets him up so well in these handicap races, like you said, at Group 1 level. And Maddie said that he's going as good as ever before. And, they had that Epsom circled last year, like you said, before that sickness struck. So why not get the big black pen out again and circle this year's edition of the Epsom, another handicap? And I really do think Yellow Brick is a proper miler, nothing more, nothing less. I do love those lead-in runs, but he's now won $2.5 million in prize money, and he's yet to win a race interstate. I think that says it all about Yellow Brick, and I'm tipping a big Spring Carnival ahead for this horse in this stable. And you know what? I'm gonna take my big black pen out as well and circle that horse and circle that race heading into the Spring Carnival. I think as soon as they can get that horse to Sydney and let the horse get comfortable down there, rather than leaving any travel later on, that'd be the best thing to do. Just get him down there and just all eyes focus on that Epsom. I couldn't agree more with you. I think if they thought he was going to win it last year. He can definitely win it this year because that's probably the biggest and best run I've ever seen from Yellow Brick on the weekend.
I'm with you there for sure. But the other one, as we touched on briefly, our Stradbroke winner in War Machine, there's so many questions around what his Spring Carnival is going to look like now. The Hayes brothers, they mentioned possibly an Everest. I don't know about you, but I don't know if this horse is ready for a Group 1 weight for age. He's going to have to improve at least a length in my book. What do you think about it?
But look, I think they when they talk about War Machine, they talk about how fast he is progressing. He's only been in the hands of the Hayes boys, not long at all, and they've seen progression themselves. So, look, I'm not ruling out. I think the horse has definitely got enough scope to run in a race like the Everest, but it also adds a very interesting, side of the story, given David Hayes and Kane Rising are going to be there for the Everest. So, taking War Machine to an Everest, I don't, see War Machine as a key hope in a race like that. But for racing fans, the boys probably would love the opportunity to take their pin-up boy to go and compete against their dad's pin-up boy who's going to be over here for the race. So that's what racing's about. It's about the stories. It's what we love. And I'm sure if War Machine goes to an Everest, we're going to be talking about exactly that. It's going to be our first talking point. So
Oh, definitely.
yeah, he's got so many options, and how far can what distance can War Machine get out to? That's the other question. I got no reason to suggest that he can't get a mile. So
Oh,
again,
absolutely.
just like Cool Archie, time will tell. Time in the paddock, progression, really maturing. These horses of that quality always seem to keep progressing, both physically and with their ability to race. So. Geez, it's exciting. It's so exciting. The Queensland Carnival this year has produced more stories and more, it's been, what would you call it? Almost like
It's been a thriller.
a trampoline almost for so many different,
Yes.
not only horses, but trainers and even jockeys into the Spring Carnival. And it's, yeah, big tick to Queensland and their racing jurisdiction. It was the best I've seen. I'm going to say that. It's the best Queensland
I'm with
Carnival I've ever
you.
seen.
I'm with you. Obviously, I have a bit of a biased opinion in previous years when we had the likes of Zaki and, some really quality horses in the barn. But outside of, my biased opinion working hands on with a stable, this has just been a truly remarkable carnival with so many good quality horses. Before we move on to this weekend's preview, though, we have to give a shout out to Kovalika. Finally got there, but God, he needed every inch of the Eagle Farm Straight to do it, didn't he?
Yeah, I think, owner Nev Morgan might have been the only one who believed that this horse was going to win another race.
He actually tipped it to Luke at golf the week before.
Well, the runs prior, the Hollandale and the Durban Cup was super. There was no reason to suggest that, it wasn't going to be thereabouts. But, and don't get me wrong, a big drought of not winning never stopped me, and I'm sure yourself, from really enjoying watching this horse race and compete. It's not always about winning. Winning's great, and winning's what everyone strives to do. But for us fans, it's always been a pleasure watching this horse, compete. 2 years between drinks is a long time, but I'm sure the drinks never tasted sweeter. Connections after the Q22, and I can't lie, I was definitely cheering home Faulkner Park, or my pockets were anyway. He's finally hit back and shown that he can hang with the very best, and he's won a boatload of money now, between $3 and $4 million, I believe, and
Kovalika.
yeah, I'd love to see Chris Waller target a Melbourne Cup. I think that.
Well, they are. Did you see Nev Morgan's interview this morning? It might have been just before we came on air. Yeah, Nev jumped on Tab Radio, going to target a Melbourne Cup. He's out in the paddock at the moment.
Good.
He obviously got his ballot-free entry into a Caulfield Cup, so they're going to build his preparation around that run.
Fantastic.
And then look to just go 4 lengths better than last year's run in the Melbourne Cup.
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, like I said, I love watching this horse compete, but I think the Melbourne Cup's the only big Group 1 that he's a chance of winning.
Yeah.
Look, and that's just being totally honest. I think those other Group 1s, they're just too packed. They're just too packed with talent, and I just think this horse is one that just is going to just get better over further. And I think if they're after a big Group 1, a major, the Melbourne Cup's the one. So that's great news to hear that Kovalika is going to be targeting. I would have been surprised if Chris Waller was suggesting otherwise.
Yeah, almost definitely. The horse certainly had no real fault of his own in his run in the Melbourne Cup last year. I believe he followed Vauban and Buckaroo into the run, which, looking on paper, at that race, you would assume that they would be the horses that you'd want to get your bunny into the run with. But Obviously, things didn't unfold that way. Knight's Choice surprised absolutely everyone. So if he, gets a better run this time around, maybe runs his own race, Kovalica could be our story of the spring.
Oh, geez, wouldn't that be a
Wouldn't
wouldn't it be a
it'd be
treat?
the perfect bow, wouldn't it?
It'd be a treat. It'd be a treat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's that record on paper, that 2 years between drinks it doesn't look promising when you're going into a race with 20 plus horses.
God no.
But if there's going to be a big race that Kovalik is going to win, it's going to be that 2 mile. That's got to be.
Yeah. Oh, of course. The further, the better. He'll do really well in the weights, I'd like to think. But regardless of the result, he is the apple of Nev Morgan's eye. I believe he's earned over 41 times his initial purchase price. So they've had a remarkable career with this horse despite the long wait, which I think is, why they're happy to just be so patient with him. He always tries. He always gives us a spectacle, and he's just a true sweetheart.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's well, so would that suggest that Kovalik is having a bit of a break now?
Yes, I believe so. Have a small break and then come back and wind up through the grades once again before obviously heading towards a Caulfield Cup and hopefully springboard then into the Melbourne Cup.
Oh, sounds good to me. Sounds
Oh, I know,
good to
right?
me.
Well, it also sounds good to me. We have a bit of a break from Group 1 racing this weekend, but we head to the lovely Ipswich for the TAB Ipswich Cup. Now, a lot of people laugh at me when I say this, but Ipswich is one of my favourite tracks for Queensland racing. I know a lot of people might say otherwise, but it just plays so fair. Every horse that I've had run there has just always been in such equal competition. Every horse has its chance, and it makes for a great track to bet at. So we're going to have a bit of fun with 3 key races this weekend. We've got the Ipswich Cup, the Eyeliner, and the Gay Waterhouse Classic. Plenty to look forward to there. So the Ipswich Cup, we were going to kick off with Miss Jolene, is our favourite for Kelly Schweeder at the moment. Was racing up against the likes of Antino earlier on in the preparation, but she's been up a while now, sees a drastic step up in distance from the mile, and with our top weight, I can't have her in this race. But I do have 2 to watch here. Osmos for Gay Waterhouse and Adrian Bott. It's always an eye catcher when this team send a horse to Ipswich, that's for sure. 2 runs back from a spell have been good with placings at listed level, the draw suits, but the one that I do have my eye keenly on is Diablo Bolt. Showed plenty of promise at this distance last prep, been super consistent, Queensland horse for the Archibald team. First 2 runs this preparation were a pass mark, but he's back up over the 2,000 metres, finds a good surface, huge weight relief, ticks all round for Diablo Bolt for me, and he's just a cool little fella. He used to be in my barn at Annabelle's. God,
There it is. I was waiting for that.
There it is. He's such a cool dude. This other race, the Eyeliner Stakes, this is a very special race to me, actually. Not a lot of people know this, but my stable favourite, Holyfield. He was one of the first horses that I ever worked with in racing. He seemed to follow me from, I think we pre-trained him at Casey's. He went on to Kieran's. When I moved to Annabelle's, he came to Annabelle's and he won the Eyeliner on my 21st birthday. So this race is a very special one for me, but our favourite, Warney. You were wanting to see him in a Stradbroke, and he starts here, obviously the very well-deserved favourite. He's super consistent despite not winning, placed in his 6th most recent starts. Gelded prior to this prep, the team are really hoping that that is going to pay off, but so far I've been impressed with him. He was particularly great in the Moreton Cup despite not winning again. Trailed the rest of the field, burst home late. It was a tough run up the straight. He'll certainly strip fitter. Up in distance, maps to get a nice run from barrier 3, and I think he'll seriously take some beating here. So I'm not looking elsewhere. I'm with the rest of the punters. Warney all way in the Eyeliner. As for the Gay Waterhouse Classic, our favourite is from the yard of the namesake herself. We have Gerringong. I hope I'm saying that right. I feel like I'm probably not.
Gerringong, I think it is.
Gerringong. God, you make it sound so easy. Well, he's coming in after being the bridesmaid in her 2 starts this campaign, both at listed level in Scone and Eagle Farm, respectively. Drawn wide once again as she did last start, which does worry me here a bit more at Ipswich than it did previously for both her and my second pick, Midnight Tokyo. Both of them do have plenty of merit as backmarkers, but there's going to be plenty of speed early from the likes of Bubba's Bay and Memoria. Gerringong, Did I get it right? I hope I
Don't
did.
quote. Don't quote.
Has that electric turn of foot that could see her home, whereas I do worry a bit more about Midnight Tokyo really not having enough room to build into her run the way she typically does at the likes of, Doomben, Eagle Farm and the Sunshine Coast. But with that being said, I know we touched on Chris and Corey Muntzer having an absolute stellar season, so I cannot look past their runner, Navy on the Highway. She had a flying start to her career. She put together 4 wins from 5 starts. I got this muddled up the wrong way last week too. Don't know why I keep doing it. But she's been out of form recently. The team have been on fire though. Sees a nice weight relief with Talia Fenlon taking the reins. Maps to get a nice run up on the speed, and it might be her first time at Ipswich, but I do think that this track will play really, really nicely for this filly. So that's my picks for the 3 features up at beautiful Ipswich. Hopefully it'll be a cracking day, but I know you have a few Flemington favourites for us too.
Yeah, back to the best racetrack in the world outside of Ipswich.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't get better than headquarters, and I've got my eyes on a few runners. For a few different reasons as well. I might be out there myself this weekend at Flemington. I haven't quite made the decision yet, but I'm interested. I'm interested for a few different reasons. But we will start race 3, number 5, Cleo Cat. Can do it anywhere from anywhere. A really, really smart mare who's sat very wide last start, in behind a Group 1 winner in waiting in my eyes for Graham Begg in Neons. She gets in at a nice lightweight here with Craig Williams aboard, and to put it simply, I'm really finding it tough to find a horse that can beat her in this race. So I'm happy to stick with Cleo Cat. Brings in the best form, and I just don't think there's anything in this race that's going to challenge that form at the moment. So get off to a nice start in race 3. We can follow it up in race 4. Number 5, I've been loving the progression of Winning Toast since moving from Moody Coleman to Craig Conran, who's made a bit of a comeback, an old school trainer down here in Victoria, who's really found a horse who wasn't showing much with Moody Coleman and's really shown plenty. His last 2 wins have been enormous. I love how he sits off the pace, and he knows exactly what the jockey wants, and when he's asked to go, he goes, and within a few strides, he just puts them away with ease. This is easily his toughest race, but I do think a horse like this is going to love Flemington, and he's going to enjoy running down a horse like Taken, who is the likely leader in this race and is the favourite with a big weight. So an each way chance there is Winning Toast, race 4, number 5 at Flemington. And lastly, race 8, number 8, St. Lawrence, who is having his first up for new trainer Gavin Bedggood after exiting the Mar camp. And what's Gavin Bedggood known for? It's this exact scenario, getting quality horses into a smaller operation and recapturing that ability that they possess and they've shown in the past. And, he's won some good races, St. Lawrence, including a couple last spring up in Sydney. He's truly up to this level. Given Group 1, Gavin Bedggood is up to his old tricks here with St. Lawrence. His work's been as good as ever. He's 4 from 5 first up. He's going to do no work at all at Flemington from barrier 1. And I think he can win at a very, very nice each-way price. And a few extras to note on top of that. I think Cafe Millennium in race 5 can finally break through once again as a winner in the new stable. And there's a Godolphin Colt in the first, who might be a very, 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 very smart one in Observer, who's way too short to play, I think at $1.60 or $1.70. But, he's way too good not to watch. He's a very young colt on the up, and I'm very, very excited to see where Observer ends up heading into the Spring Carnival.
There's a lot to cover there, gosh, isn't there? Especially, who is Observer going to go to? He's such a precocious type. When James Cummings is out, whose lovely hands is he going to end up in? Is it going to be the 2-year-old queen herself, Gay Waterhouse, perhaps? Or Kieran? Kieran got Leilani Lodge today. Who knows?
Plenty of boxes. There's plenty of boxes for Kieran to fill up with some Observer. But, geez, the way that Observer won under Mark Zara last start was mind-blowing. 5 lengths, put him away early, sits on speed, loves the rail. I don't know what's stopping Observer in these next couple of months. And I think, a nice win this weekend. Tip it out. put it straight back in and have a very nice preparation set up for a horse that just, you just know when these Godolphin horses are going to be ones to watch. It was a
Yeah.
huge win and a short price in a field in race one at Flemington this weekend that's actually got some pretty good talent. Impending War for the Hazeyards, unbeaten and won super at Swan Hill just last week or a couple of weekends ago. Red Observer, $1.70. It's $1.70 for a reason.
Yeah, definitely. You and the rest of the punters are with him. Well, last night, as a Melbourneian, who were you with in the State of Origin? Could you stay up for that, or was it too late for you?
Absolutely, I stayed up for that. It was one of the best state of
You did
origin,
better than me.
one of the best state of origin games I've seen in my life, or from memory anyway. The rain, it was just pissing down in Perth, and it really set up for a game that was going to be one full of knock-ons and full of penalties and full of mistakes, and Queensland capitalised in that first half. And I think Billy Slater said himself walking out after half time, he said, "This is far from over." And it was exactly that. So it's always good going into game three with a one all draw. It's going to be tough for the Queenslanders to get it done in Sydney for game
Oh,
three.
yeah.
To hold out a New South Wales side that's probably going to have some significant ins come the game three. And oh, geez, I'm already looking forward to it. I love Origin. But yes, as you said, down here in Victoria, I think I've said this before, we are all Queensland, if not for a few. It's the influence of those Storm legends, Slater, Cronk, Smith, and their influence on Queensland as we were growing up. Especially, I can talk from people who are my age or close enough. We're all Queenslanders.
Yeah, gosh, it's a huge thrill for all the Queensland side, but it's been a bit of a roller coaster week for the team. Following it all in the news, there's been a lot of dramas with players. Even Billy Slater got himself into some hot water with some comments. What do you make of it all? We don't really seem to have this sort of political drama with who says what in the media with our AFL.
Oh, it can. Oh, that's debatable. It can.
Depending on which teams you look at, I
Yeah, I guess
suppose.
it can get, nasty in any sport. And, people are always going to, have their opinions and have preconceived, judgments on certain people. And, no matter what they say, they're going to have a dig at them. For me, play on. And I think, they got the win last night. So, the decisions that they've made have obviously been winning decisions. So I think put it all behind you, focus on now on game three and get the win.
Well, we'll take a leaf out of your book then and continue to play on. We've got, what's it now? 3 days left of Royal Ascot. We've got Ipswich. We've got Randwick as the races this weekend. Flemington. It's all happening. And we've got a huge week to catch up on next week.
Looking forward to it. We'll go again.
We'll go again. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Small Talk brought to you by My Pay Now.